So how does the CheckOUT handle on the road? For this bike to be a good value, it must be capable on and off the road. So to test it out, I took it on a 21-mile all-road ride through the streets of East San Jose, up Calaveras Road for a massive climb, gaining some 2,300 feet in just 14 miles, topping the climb with a fast ride past the Sierra Vista Lookout, and then descending 3.5 miles back to the streets of East San Jose. So let's look at the data from 4 different rides on 4 different bikes. My retired Trek Checkpoint, my retired Emond SLR7, which is a road bike, very lightweight, my Santa Cruz Stigmata, and the Trek CheckOUT SL7. Now obviously I'm faster on the road bike, so if you look at the second column, the Emond, in 21.63 miles, I averaged about 13 miles per hour. Go over to the fourth column, the CheckOUT, a slightly shorter ride, but essentially the same circuit, 20.5 miles, averaging 12.4 miles per hour. Now, this isn't exactly GCN science right now. There's a lot of variables in each of these rides. But the one constant is that when I go out, I'm just looking to put in a solid effort. I'm not looking to break any of my personal records. I just want to go out and put in a good solid effort. And, you know, when I look at the data from literally hundreds of rides over the years, there's a lot of constants, there's a lot of consistency. So this is a pretty fair comparison. It's essentially the same route and essentially the same conditions. There's always a lot of wind coming off the foothills, etc. And so I think it's a pretty good gauge of just how well gravel bikes like the CheckOUT, the Stigmata, and the Checkpoint, how they perform on the road. Look at the bottom row though. You've got the Strava segment, Calaveras to Top Sierra. Now this is an 8.5 mile section of road. You're climbing 1,842 feet. And it's a slow grind. It's a beautiful ride. You're just going through the foothills. You're going past pastures, and you can see the Calaveras Reservoir off in the distance at one point. Okay, well, let's look at the data. On the Emond, again, much faster. I did that route in 58 minutes and 3 seconds, averaging 8.8 miles per hour. The Stigmata was the next fastest, averaging 8.2 miles per hour, and then look at the CheckOUT, 8 miles per hour. Slower than the Emond, certainly that much slower. For a recreational rider, even an avid cyclist, that's pretty good. One little word on the Checkpoint, probably would have averaged about 8 miles per hour, but I definitely stopped. That was what, May? Yeah, I definitely stopped along the way to watch the cows grazing. So again, looking at the data from 3 gravel bikes and the very lightweight Emond SLR7, I mean, you'll notice that there isn't a lot sacrificed on a gravel bike, and there's so much gained in terms of comfort that, you know, I just think everybody should own a gravel bike. So let's talk about how it handles on the road. We'll talk first about gearing. There is a 38-tooth chainring in the front and a 1051 cassette in the back. It's a 12-speed. And definitely you're going to get to that highest gear, the hardest gear, very quickly. I've never really found myself spinning. I'm certainly not as fast as, say, I would be on a road bike with a different gearing, but it felt really comfortable. And I've been riding a one-by for a little over a year now with the Stigmata and now the CheckOUT. I've gotten really accustomed to the gearing. This bike definitely favors climbs. It's got that mountain bike gearing. Sometimes I have to remind myself to drop into a higher gear just to kind of push myself. But if you're worried about climbing, that's not going to be an issue at all. It climbs very well. In terms of, you know, handling on the road, it is super comfortable. Even locking out the suspension, it's very smooth. I remember riding a lot of these roads on my Emond, and you just hit a tiny little pothole, a divot in the road, and you just really feel it through your body, particularly when you're going at speed. But on the CheckOUT, it's just a smooth ride. It's kind of like a Cadillac, if you will. Just super comfortable. In terms of the weight, is that much of an issue? Well, the CheckOUT is a heavier bike, but the gearing is very favorable to the rider. And so I've never had an issue. I do a lot of climbing, so this is my sort of riding, but it handles marvelously on the road. And just been super impressed with the CheckOUT in that regard. So let's summarize. How capable is the CheckOUT on the road? It's a very capable bike, and that gives it good value because it's not a road bike, it's not a mountain bike, it's a gravel bike, and you expect to go anywhere on a gravel bike, and you expect to do it efficiently. And I think the Trek CheckOUT, the Santa Cruz Stigmata, and any other number of gravel bikes perform very well. And while you may not be as fast as, say, on a lightweight road bike such as the Emond or the Cervelo R5, that's something I'd like to try out, you're just not that much slower, and you gain so much in terms of comfort. You gain so much in terms of versatility, being able to ride the roads and being able to ride the trails. It's just such a capable bike, and it's such a fun bike. One final note, when I looked at the data from this ride, I noticed quite to my surprise that I had broken my personal records on the descent. And the reason for that is the dropper post. On my Emond, yeah, I'm fast, but I'm not a confident rider, and being so high up on a windy descent, it's actually a pretty fierce descent. In 3.5 miles, you lose all of the elevation you gain. So you're dropping a little over 2,000 feet in 3.5 miles. It's a fast descent. And, you know, on my Emond, I'm fast, but I'm also just not that confident. But on the CheckOUT, lower that dropper post, that's 100 meters. That's 100 millimeters of travel, and it just lowers your center of gravity. And I just felt so confident on the descent that I actually got my personal records on the descent. Now, a competitive cyclist, I'm going to guess probably be a little faster on a road bike, but my experience was very positive in that regard. All right, so for the remainder of this video, I'm just going to play out the rest of the video from the ride. We'll jump over to the fast descent, and then you'll get to see what it's like to ride on the road. East San Jose, it's nighttime, you know, the sun's been setting, and so when we get down to the bottom of the road, it'll be very dark, and you'll get to see how it is to compete with the cars.